everyone. It is my honor to introduce you to our closing panel for the day. I hope you all had a great day. We are going to have the NCAA's newest power players, the rise of the GM. I'm Kelly. I'm an MBA student at MIT Sloan, like many of the other content people you have met today. So today, for our panelists, they need no introduction. You know them well, but in their new roles here, they're going to be speaking. Andrew will be speaking as the general manager of Stanford Football, and Adrian Wojnarowski will be speaking as the general manager of St. Bonaventure's men's basketball. Moderating our panel, we will have Michael Lewis, author and journalist, and big SSAC returning moderator. So we're really lucky for this panel to be occurring today, and thank you all for being here. With that.
Thank you, Kelly. That's great. I was talking with the organizers a few months ago, and they asked me if I wanted to do anything. And this subject, the subject of, it's the commercialization of college athletics, is something that I really don't know anything about, and I thought would use the panel just to learn about it. And so that's what I am here. I'm basically here to figure out if there's a book in this subject. and this is the first conversation I will have had about it. And we have met briefly, the three of us have met briefly on a Zoom, but it really is not prepared. And one of the things I'd hoped to do was crowdsource some of the questions. I want your contribution to this because I think it's unmapped territory. Like their roles are a new role. It's a little unclear what it is and where this is all going. But I want to start with Andrew and then go to Woj, but I wanted to ask you first, just set this up a bit for us. What led you to? What is your job? Why did you decide to do it? And the third part is, if I wandered into your office and said, like, what's the story here? What's the story here? Like, what should I? Is there material here? Like I smell. But let's explain how you got to what you're doing.
I'm going to forget one of the questions.
All right, I'll remind you.
But I'll start, what is my job? I'm title general manager of the Stanford football team. I think if you were to add the titles of a professional team of team president, director of football, general manager, whatever it is, running football, football vertical, and obviously working with our athletic department on the business vertical of it. And it is a little bit unique at Stanford. I believe we're the only structure in college football that has a GM sitting at the top of the football pyramid, not beneath the head coach. And for those who are college football fans, you know that sport, my sport in college, has been built on the cult of coach forever and ever and ever. Bear Bryant, Nick Saban.
Yeah.
That's traditionally been how college football has been built. So that is my job.
And the coaches acknowledge you're sitting on top of them. So you're functioning a lot like a GM on a professional sports team.
Yeah. And our coach, Troy Taylor, has been fantastic. And frankly, I was curious what his reaction was going to be when I walked into his office to the president of our school had shared the news with him. I was going to be the GM and, the structure.
I want to just poke and prod you a little bit before we get to but who first thinks it's a good idea to create a GM for the Stanford football team? Is there a GM for all the Stanford sports?
Nope.
Just the football team?
There is, just the football team. And it was our president.
President of the university?
Of the university.
The former one who?
Nope.
The current one?
Current one, started in September.
Okay. Yeah. And why? Why did they think it was a good idea?
I think he astutely observed that college football is changing, had been changing, is changing, and is going to continue to change.
Yeah.
I think he observed that Stanford football had a bit of catching up to do, to put it mildly. And that we were and are still sort of sitting on this razor's edge in college football, like a theory being at some point it's going to break again, and if you're not in whatever it is, you're going to be left out forever.
And so they called you and said, are you interested?
Honestly, I was sitting in his office. I'd requested an audience with the president to share my bullet points on football. And,
are you serious?
Yeah, we were going to leave town. My wife and I bought a house somewhere else, and we're ready to go in the summer. And I was like, I better get my thoughts out, and don't take them out of the state with me. I'll probably get taxed on it too, California. But sat down in the middle of the conversation. Well, a couple minutes in, I realized, oh my gosh, this president knows the micro issues of our sports teams, and speaking macro about where college football, where college sports could go. And in the middle of the conversation, he organically asked, well, why don't you run football for me, Andrew? And I screamed inside, yes, I will do this. But I had to check with my wife.
But did you have any idea when you're in that office that there is going to be this role?
No, did not.
Okay, so this is just an accident.
No, I should say, as a football fan, I'd seen that GMs were popping up at other schools.
Right.
And really, but it also, I think, acknowledging that these GMs were sort of the personnel recruiting, the traditional recruiting coordinator was maybe being split apart into a couple different jobs, and a GM was really head of personnel,
all right,
sitting under a coach.
So before we're going to get into what's changing in college football and what the job is, all of this, but I want you quickly, Woj, I want you to explain to me. I read that article. I think it must have been ESPN about who quits a $7 million a year job for a $70,000 a year job. It was actually an amazing piece of journalism. But I want to just tell us your story and what your job is and how you came to it.
I think essentially at St. Bonaventure, which is a school in the Atlantic 10, which is a very good conference by any metric in a given year, 7th, 8th. Some years 6th maybe in the country, but there's no school quite like ours in that we only have 1,800 to 1,900 undergrads. There's lots of schools like ours, but they don't play in a conference like we do. They play with other like schools, and so we've always had to punch up resources.
You're a graduate.
I'm a graduate, and so
you're both back at the schools you went to.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's the only, for me, the only way this would have ever happened is doing it at St. Bonaventure.
You didn't want to be a basketball GM.
I am not trying to get on a college basketball GM track.
Okay.
The next track I want to get on is to a beach somewhere. Okay. There's no beaches in only in New York. So it's my alma mater. I met my wife there. My brother-in-law played basketball at St. Bonaventure. My sister-in-law went, my wife's dad. So it's an important place in our family. But I would say when he said, what is my job? And I was listening to Andrew explain, the verticals and at Stanford. We don't have any verticals at St. Bonaventure. I'm director of survival. I'm director of college basketball survival. That's how, for us, that's the fight we're in.
So how did the job ever come about? Like, did you go to them and say, you want me to be GM of the basketball program, or did they call you?
I'd been very engaged with our program for years, and Mark Schmidt, our coach, is as good as any coach in America, and the success he's had at Bonaventure in a league where, by any metric, we've been in top 3 or 4 program over his 15 plus years, and gone to the NCAA tournament. We beat high majors regularly. We've won 12 of our last 20 games against Power 4 and Big East teams.
You know what I feel like?
Out of those 20, none are at home.
I feel like I'm hearing what you're about to tell the recruits in Eastern Europe tomorrow. He's on his way to Eastern Europe. You've got your pitch down about why to come to St. Bonaventure.
Yeah, I was listening to one of our soccer, walls are thin there, and one of our assistant soccer coaches was on with a player, I think it was an international player, and we can hear each other's conversations. And I heard him say, I wrote it in my notebook, he said, listen, academically here in this country, there's Harvard, and then there's St. Bonaventure, right there. I wrote it down in my notebook. For us, it's a special place, and we have a unique challenge in this landscape. And so, but I had been talking with them. I had been engaged, and especially since the portal opened and NIL, I had been helping to lead our collective and trying to raise money for to keep players, to recruit players. And then, I would help in conversations with players, because once the collectives, you were able to talk to recruits, so I could get on the phone with our current, I would get to know our current players certainly and try to help them with some of the relationships I had around. And I would tell you, and I know Jonathan Gavoni from ESPN is in here, and he would be able to attest to this. I'd be in the middle of free agency or trade deadline at different times, and I've got like 2 concurrent conversations going. I'm literally breaking news and then hitting Gavoni. What do you know about this kid from Serbia? What do you know about, is that guy going in the portal? And I found my enthusiasm for doing these 2 things. I kept asking myself last year, what would you rather do? And the answer kept coming back, I'd rather go do that job. And so I brought it up with our athletic director right before the NBA draft. I said, listen, I'm going to be busy here the next few days. Let me know what you think of this. And he said, you would be our GM in addition to ESPN? And I said, no, I'm gonna leave. And I said, talk to Coach about it, and let's circle back in a few days. And we started that conversation in late June.
So what is the job? Are you sitting on top of the coaching staff
No.
like Andrew's sitting on top of the coaching staff?
I think Andrew's unique in the whole landscape.
Is that true?
Yeah, I'm sure of that. Yeah.
So there's this job called GM of a sport at a college, but it's not the same job from college to college. So we don't know.
I think
what is your job?
My job is to serve our coach. My job is to.
I thought you were about to say serve the Lord. But yeah, you have that tone about you.
No, but it's to serve our coach,
Yeah.
our players, to raise money in NIL. That's obviously vital, and to bring them options, to use the relationships that I built in basketball around the world. And Coach Schmidt's gonna decide who's on our team.
Right.
I'm gonna help try to create a payroll and a structure,
Right.
and then build out some sustainable revenue, we hope, models in NIL. So just going to that donor model is really hard to keep going back. We've got to figure out and work on other ways. But
so you're raising money.
you raise the money, and then
But you're going to go talk to basketball players.
yeah, I'm out
you're selling
recruiting.
basketball,
So
but you're
I'm
recruiting.
out recruiting. I'm at high school games. I'm at junior college games. I'm at international events. I'm on with agents all day.
The coach is telling you who to recruit.
Well, what I'm trying to do is bring them, hey, we can get involved here. Here's a player. Let's watch some film. What do you think of them? So they might say, yeah, really like these three. This one's not a fit. And I think over time, you start to understand who fits your program and your coach.
Right.
And then it's a salary cap, right? So you might prefer this guy from this guy, but that precludes us from doing these 2, 3.
Right.
So then you're trying to figure out how this puzzle fits together. And now, you have this sort of moving target on what your salary cap is. In the NBA, you know what your salary cap is,
Right.
generally, right? And you know whether the owner is willing to go into luxury tax or not. Mine is, 2 months ago, I thought my cap would be one thing, and then we raised some more money, and I'm like, you know what, I think we could go here and that. And so it's a little bit of a moving target.
So you're the equivalent, if this was a professional sports enterprise, you'd be kind of director of scouting and business development and some other, it's not exactly like a GM of a pro sports team. You're not making the big personnel decisions.
No, and it's as much as anything, if you were at Stanford or a high major, the group of players that you would recruit, and I'm sure at Stanford academically, their pool of players it's fairly finite, right? Mm-hmm. Ours is infinite. Where we are, it's high major players moving down, it's other mid majors moving sideways, it's low majors moving up, junior college. Where, say, at a high major, international, their pool of players that they're going to recruit is smaller, and ours is endless. And so instead of trying to be fully, you can't cover the whole world. I'm one person in our staff. So I try to go to places where we have relationships and I have trust, and I want people who I have history with and who I know will be good partners with us on players and families. Our place isn't for everybody, just like Stanford, right. And everybody's a little unique. So you try to zero in on places you think you have strength and say, Coach, hey, here's a pool of guys that makes sense for us, and let's dig in on them.
All right, so I have a bunch of kind of stupid questions to ask, but I think it's the world has changed so fast, and people really haven't paused to think about what the changes even are, much less what they mean. But we're talking about just the money for a minute, like what the rules are. Because I had different answers from different people who's supposed to know. And tell me if this is wrong, that there is a conversation about creating a salary cap for at least the Power 5 schools of about $25 million across all sports, but that hasn't happened yet, and it's going to happen next year, maybe?
I got you.
Okay, help me.
I think we're living in the collective era,
all right,
if you will, which I think has been wild, wild west. And the House settlement is April 7th, something like that, April 8th. that hopefully goes through. I think we're in a
what is that?
whole world of a mess. The House settlement will bring, I think, a level of sanity to the system, because it is going to create a salary cap at $20.5 million that athletic departments, will disperse to students
And this will affect St. Bonaventure as well as Stanford.
they see fit.
Okay.
We'll come in a little under the cap.
Okay.
St. Bonaventure.
And you can do it. That's across all sports.
And that's across all sports.
So
in theory, you could decide. A school could pick a singular sport or a singular Michael Lewis,
right.
and pay $20.5of million to you.
It's an amazingly interesting, complicated problem.
There's also a back pay. Part of the settlement is a back pay, and I think 75% money going to football players, 15% men's basketball, 5% women's basketball, 5%
players who didn't
other.
get paid in olden times.
Till 2016.
That doesn't affect you.
I'm too
You're not going to get paid?
No,
Okay.
I got paid playing ball. I'm good. I'm fine.
All right.
And that I think is intended to reflect the market
right.
On football. So, I know I am. I can't imagine this House settlement not going through, because it will bring a level of sanity to the system.
So let me just stop everyone saying, that happens, but does that mean that it's then forbidden for Larry Ellison to buy the quarterback from Michigan from LSU?
I don't know how verboten it's going to be, but Larry Ellison could donate to Michigan,
over and above the.
And look, I know that we at Stanford and many, many, many others, and maybe all, and certainly talking about the ACC, compliance to the cap is going to be important, right?
But I'm just, is there any off-books operation that will be allowed?
They're not allowed, but there's been off-book operations in college sports since time immemorial.
We're just waiting for the next lawsuit to determine whether the schools can force the salary cap.
The NCAA has been under incredible antitrust suits just over and over and over, and it broke, right? It broke. And so this House settlement will be the beginning of what I think is this new era, which is still an interregnum. It's still, there's going to be something new, but eventually we do have to get to a state of enduring and sustainable perpetuity. And
maybe.
We have to.
Yeah.
We have to. It can't change every 2 years, 3 years. And including as a business model.
So I didn't understand this. I thought the world we were about to walk into, there were two ways the athletes were going to get paid. One was by the school directly, the 20.5 out of that pool of how much money it is, and one is by the Larry Ellisons of the world who want to come in and help.
The collectives will still exist in most cases. The NCAA has talked about putting in a third party. Deloitte's been discussed about as a third party that would regulate what they would call fair market value on NIL deals. And so any player, any student athlete who had a deal that was over $600, right, has to report it to the NCAA or to Deloitte, this third party. And so the idea is that they would police, essentially salary cap circumvention. My sense is that $20.5 million figure for the highest of high majors is only the beginning of that they're still going to have NIL deals. I get the sense people's budgeting even double what that 20.5 combined football, basketball, that they'll still be able to use their collectives. I think the questions a lot of us have is, how do you decide fair market value on if a company in Buffalo, New York wants to do an NIL deal with one of our players? To me, the fair market value is what that company sees that player's value is. Or if a collective, I think what they're trying to is player gets X amount of dollars from a collective, he has to do 3 or 4 community service events a year to earn that money. The problem is we're all just making these numbers up.
Okay.
All of us.
So this is what I thought. Okay, so we don't know.
So to say what's fair market value, they made up a number, we made up a number, Stanford's making up a number.
Right.
And so a third party is going to say, your made up number's okay, yours isn't, and then I think the fair is then they'll be right back when someone's deal is nixed.
Have you all both already been in negotiations with high school students? Actual negotiations to come and play for your school? Have you had the money talks with people?
Absolutely, and transfers.
Tell me give me an example. You don't have to name a name, but give me an example of what someone asked for.
Definitely won't name a name, but there's a full spectrum of who you talk to as well.
Okay.
Right, from agents at blue chip firms that represent NFL players, to parents of kids, to guardians, to an uncle or another relative to the young man himself. And so, and as you can imagine, you also get this sort of full spectrum of type of conversation.
I want to hear a couple of them. What these sound? Like, do they walk in and say, "I'll come, but I want $8 million and I want a 6-bedroom house and I want my mother to have a job"?
Housing is a part of it. Certainly, there are asks, and oftentimes parents perhaps being a little more forthright or aggressive with asks. Now, look, we're at Stanford. We have, I think by and large the sieve that the filter that we're using, and the young men that can get into our school, because we do ask our young men to apply, and they do have to write the same 5 essays to get into school as everybody else.
Is this really true? I mean,
that's
true. I know you have to.
Absolutely
I know
true.
You have to apply, but is there not does the admissions office actually hold the football players to the standards they hold everybody else?
Look, I'm not in the admissions office, and I don't know what the standards are. But I will say they have not. The admissions office has not lessened the standards for football players or basketball players since I was there.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And look, it's something that we are proud of at Stanford, and my thesis and our thesis for winning is that we can do this in a thoughtful way.
Right.
But there are enough young, smart, football talented men out there in high school. We just got to make sure we get those guys. Our yield can't be low there.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was asking, I want to hear both of you give me an example of when they come in, what the expectations are now. It's so changed since when you were a high school athlete. When you look at it, do you think, wow, I wish I could have gone through this?
It is changed, and look, I hold a deeply held belief it needed to change.
Yeah.
This is billions dollar industry, and the product on the field and the young men absolutely deserve a slice of it. And I'm going to answer a different question for a second. I only see a world in which some combination of federal legislation and a collectively bargained agreement sort of interact to create
limits on what people get paid.
And just an enduring state of whatever this is, especially for football and basketball. And there's a whole question about what the heck happens to Olympic sports. Right?
So we're going to get to that.
And we'll get that. But would I have enjoyed being in this world? Sure, I would have loved to have made some money and play quarterback and go to the greatest university in the world on scholarship. Sounds like a hell of a deal, to be honest.
Knowing what you know now about the market for top high school quarterbacks, what would you have paid you?
What would I have paid me?
Yeah.
Millions, baby.
No, I'm curious. What was the?
You should ask my dad.
No, I'm just very curious. What is the you now? What is their market value?
The Michigan allegedly paid $10 million. I'm not sure, over what course of time for their player, but. I think back to Washington. We don't really know what market value is. What Michigan decided to pay that kid. What school X, pays that kid. I think that's what's so weird about the situation. That's also what's so fun and intoxicating for me is it feels a bit of a Gordian knot. And like Woj, it's my alma mater. I wouldn't do this anywhere else. I think you really have to believe in something to wade into this world, into the Wild West of college football, because it's wacko, right? And it sort of doesn't make sense. And I certainly believe, what we got going on at Stanford and where we're trying to go. But yeah, millions. I would have loved some money. Heck, absolutely. Nothing wrong with that.
You're not answering my question. My question was what you were actually worth.
Oh, what was I worth? I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah, it's worth whatever
someone was willing to pay.
Yeah.
So the conversations you're having with basketball players, you're going to Belgrade tomorrow. You're going to start talking to players. Money will come up. What do they expect?
If money's the first part of our conversation, it'll be a short conversation, because we're not going to win a bidding war. If I'm preparing right in this job, and if I'm trying to focus in with players and agents, and you kind of know your pool. I'm not going to go have the same conversation with the player that's, Duke and Kansas are recruiting. We're not going to be involved in that. I think for us, the focus for us and how I think we've identified it, we might be the first stop on the way somewhere else. And I think we have to be okay with helping a player to spend a couple years with us when he's younger, perhaps, an international player. We're a great first stop in the U.S. before he goes to, if we can help a guy get to a high major and make $1.5 million, $2 million a year, we can provide great value for him. And I know people, even at our place, don't love hearing that, but that's the reality. Or we're the place to come when you got to get the basketball right. You took NIL somewhere else. You picked geography. You picked weather. And it didn't go great. And you got knocked on your butt. We have a Hall of Fame coach, and we have a very good league, and I'm going to try to help you with the pro stuff. And maybe we get the guys who are coming back.
You get rehab practice.
Yeah, but also guys also have a different perspective. I will spend, you mentioned the high school players. I have spent a lot of time this year on high school players who are top 50, top 75, top 100 in the country. It is very unlikely we are going to sign them now. But I want to build relationships with these players domestically, internationally, because they may come back to us in 2 or 3 years. And they may be in the portal. Now you have a relationship with them. You got to know them and their families. The world might look different than them in 2 years than they see it right now. So I've spent a lot of time doing that, knowing I saw Monty McNair earlier, and I was sharing that with Monty, the Sacramento GM. And in my mind, it was always a little like when an NBA team could get let's say they have the 27th pick in the draft,
right,
and they have a lottery pick who they could get in for a visit. Well, they're not going to probably be able to make a trade to move up, and he's probably not going to drop to them. But you know what? They got that player on their campus. They got him. They got some information from him. He got to meet with people. Maybe they learned some things about him that will be useful down the road. And so that, to me, is how you're doing it. There's not these dramatic moments of, if somebody's coming into me and all of a sudden we get to money and it's so far out of whack, it's my fault. It's not their fault. I probably haven't prepared very well for where we're going, but you're going to get into negotiations with, let's say we get in the portal or an international player. I think the high school model for us, older's better at our level. And so, I have a dream of having a 25 and under roster. We potentially could have some players at 24, 25 next year. And so our advantage, maybe the blue chip high school player who's a top 50 guy and goes to our competitors, we're not going to invest a lot of money into an unproven high school player. I look at it like an NBA salary cap, where I'm going to put almost exactly like I'm putting a percentage on our cap, just like an NBA team does. Maybe a super max, 2 maxes, mid-level exceptions, and then minimums.
Right.
And you're trying to fit, you're building out a payroll now.
Right.
I want to add to Woj real quick, Michael, because I think we're maybe not indicative of the traditional college football and basketball GM at the traditional, at some of the traditional sort of brands in college sports. And I think part of what I keep trying and what our team at Stanford keeps trying to make know thyself. Who are we?
Right.
Who can we be? How do we differentiate ourselves? Money's absolutely part of the game and part for us. But we're going to be, unlike St. Bonnie's perhaps,
we're not looking at other ways to compete.
Yeah, we're not looking at the 25 and under roster. We're looking at the developed high school kids. We can't get 30 transfer. We can't turn over a third of our roster through the transfer portal every year, nor do we. And we believe we're one of the best schools in the world. We will build off of high school recruits that we developed for 4 years, that we have incredible networking, wraparound service. We have a differentiated product that we can offer a young 18-year-old. But it's all about knowing what we can.
But also that's part of it too. You may not put a lot of money into a high school recruit, but as that player develops and as he grows, then you're really determined financially to make sure you can keep them, because we need guys and families, and I've learned this in just this time I've been here, how important who the families are of your players, that they buy into your environment and who you are. And a small school that offers some things that others don't, the things that some might see as a disadvantage for us, with certain families and kids, they're a great advantage. And so we will recruit high school players, and we are doing that. We're not going to probably invest a ton of money into a high school player until he comes in and proves himself. And then you've got to work really hard to keep those guys, because typically I think it's more expensive to replace a player than it is to.
This is another stupid question, but there are no contracts, right? Are there contracts? If a player signs with you and you pay them $1 million to play quarterback, how long do you have them locked up for? How long can you have them locked up for?
I think there was some news about a multi-year contract and a kid leaving a school to go to another school in the middle of it. So I don't think many folks are dealing with multi-year contracts. But I can tell you, our collective and St. Bonnie's Collective absolutely has a contract with a kid. And if there's a collective out there that doesn't have a contract with a kid or a kid doesn't, that's bad.
Okay, so there's a contract, but they at the end of every year,
they're free agents.
Yeah.
And is the school able to walk away from it too? We don't know.
We'll see.
Again, we
what
don't
happens.
know. Okay,
after April's and how schools end up.
So these athletes, these college athletes, are free agents in a way no athletes really have been before.
Yeah,
every year.
I think with the antitrust pressure on the NCAA, in which the athletes perhaps had zero rights, not zero, but
right.
Like the pendulum swang
the other way,
incredibly far.
Right.
The other way.
Let's talk about the effect of what's happening on other sports that aren't money sports. I mean, you're going to be sitting just with football. Stanford's. Let's just imagine it's a $20 million salary cap for all sports. You're going to be making a case for a lot of that $20 million going into football, I assume. But there's going to be an argument that happens. Who's going to adjudicate that argument?
Yeah. Of course, I'm going to advocate for football and optimize for competitiveness.
Right.
I think we certainly live in a world and in a model where football reigns supreme in this country, right? We watch the NFL and then we watch college football and TV revenue is king, and conference realignment is driven by football, at least on our level. And so absolutely, I think certainly most universities are going to be responsive to the market, you know, in certain ways, maybe we'll weight one way or the other. And I'm not sure how much of a market is going to exist around Olympic sports and athletes, and revenue share with those athletes. But I know, like at Stanford, I absolutely support the idea of making sure. Part of why I loved Stanford, one, I met my wife there. She was a gymnast, right? There's 36 sports. I went to the Olympics this past summer. We had 59 current and alums, Stanford alums, competing at the Olympics. I watched my classmates pole vault and play volleyball. Right? It was incredible. It's the most incredible athletic community to be a part of. And so, as an alum, when the next Katie Ledecky is out there, we damn well better get the next Katie Ledecky, and that might mean, playing the money game in that sense. So there's going to be a model at Stanford that I think honors, a broad 36 sports. And again, that's.
And who will decide? You're not the GM for all the sports, so
no, I'm not.
It's going to be that role.
And we don't have an athletic director right now, so probably our president will adjudicate.
This is it's very odd. There's going to be someone. So there's going to be a need for a GM on top of the GM.
Athletic director.
Because the person who's been athletic director in the past has no ability to do this kind of thing. Typically, I mean, it's such a different skill set.
College sports is changing a lot,
and
I think you're going to continue to see new non-traditional folks going in.
So let's talk about that. What kind of finance people? Are you seeing finance people turn up in your neighborhood, like private equity firms? What are they doing? What do they want?
Yeah, we've talked with private equity about. Hey, listen, we would love, I think some of these private equity companies and individuals and some that I've known from my past life, what I've told them is, let us be your proof of concept. There may not be a massive deal to do with St. Bonaventure, but it could be impactful for us. And they want to get at the Power 4 schools and those conferences.
Right.
And we've talked about, is there a world where we can do a deal with you that's, much more scaled down that shows them, hey, we've got somebody signed up. We have a model here that might work for you on a much bigger level. And we have to look at those.
What's the deal? What are they investing in? What are they buying?
They're buying, essentially, they're betting against your future revenue and getting a percentage of your future revenue stream versus, that's the general idea. Now, we're not down the road anywhere, but we've had those conversations, and I would venture to guess most schools are having those right now.
You're saying that turn up in your life too?
Absolutely, conversations for sure. And I think we just saw the Big 12 announce they had a deal with the private equity firm, Redbird, I want to say, going in at the conference level. which I think we will continue to see. I am curious, when the crossing of the Rubicon happens at a university, at a school, at an athletic department. Maybe it almost seems inevitable in a sense.
That a private equity firm comes in and buys the athletic department?
Or invests in, or buys part of it, or owns a certain stake.
And has a big voice in what's going on.
Absolutely, and perhaps provides some expertise on things that college departments traditionally have not had. And Stanford, I don't speak for all of Stanford, but we're certainly not where St. Bonnie's is in that type of conversation, because generally, the role philanthropy has played in college sports for a long time, and will continue to play will continue to be a big part, certainly, of what Stanford does, which is quite odd.
Well, it's going to be odd asking someone to give money to the program when someone else is actually buying the program and taking the revenues.
And we're not there yet.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm not sure, there could be rules against it. I'm not sure there ever will, because there really is. This is still college sports, right? And while it may at times be lip service, and student athlete might not be a true full term, I still think that, I want to believe, and maybe this is too optimistic of me, but at least at Stanford, I'll speak for, maybe at large, I want to believe that the student, the athlete, and the sort of professional, or the money part can be held in the proper tension. I don't think we want to get rid of student athlete. I think it's actually quite important for our country. And something we want to believe in.
We're a very odd society in this way. We're the only country on the planet that connects its athletics to universities in the way that we do.
And it's awesome.
I love it too, but it's different. It's not it's not normal.
Our men's basketball program, the success of it, being in the Atlantic 10 Conference, competing in a league that we've, in the last decade plus, have won a couple regular season titles, a couple postseason titles, and been really competitive in. That's important. If we didn't compete at this level, if we said we're going to scale back, we're going to drop down to a league with schools who are our size, it would be an existential threat to our university staying open. I think we all believe that. Basketball, our place, it is what drives alumni engagement, and our fans bringing our alums who come back to campus, kids who come to St. Bonaventure, to be around that Division I basketball environment. We all believe that if we struggle to compete at this level and don't stay in this fight, we worry about where our actual university will be in the future. And so for us, that's more than anything, that's what drives me every day in this. Stanford's, whether Stanford wins or loses in football and basketball, Stanford's going to be there, and Stanford's going to be what it's been.
I'll push back, actually. I think we also have an analog, in a sense, and our president identified this, that if Stanford doesn't have big-time college football, that it ceases to sort of be Stanford in totality and struggles to differentiate itself.
It becomes Harvard.
In many ways, and we don't want that.
No, we don't want that.
We don't want that at all.
There are a million different, we have 6 minutes, and there are a million different things to talk about. There's a question here that was actually the first question that led me to Moneyball, and I'm going to get to it in a minute. But one of the things, you look at the way the landscape changes, one thing happens, which seems obviously happening. The kind of person who's going to succeed as a big-time college football or basketball coach might be quite different from the person who has succeeded in the past. You see people like Tony Bennett leaving, Nick Saban leaving. I think they know that what I did is not as valuable as it was. And there's going to be some other things you need to do, namely maybe suck up to players in ways you didn't have to before, to manage differently. Manage with a roster of maybe people who are being paid more than he is. That hasn't happened yet, or has it? Are there any players who are being paid more than their coaches in college sports?
Than position coaches, absolutely.
No, the head coach.
Oh, then the head coach.
Probably not.
I'm not sure.
Probably not. But do you, when you're thinking about who's going to the coaches? You have a coach you adore, and I can guess what you're going to say. But I'm curious, if you were going to replace your coach, would you have to take into consideration this new, that money is now in the middle of these relationships?
I think you have to be adaptable. And our coach is old school in a lot of ways, but he always says, adapt or perish in this. And I think the challenge for everybody is trying to stay true to your values and who you are and what's made you great, but also allowing for the fact that it is different. And, you know, the 4 and 5 year developmental player that played a little as a freshman, played a little more as a sophomore, and then they're like this really good role player on an NCAA tournament team as a junior and senior. I don't know if we'll see that guy in our program again. And that's hard. That's why guys got into it. That's what they love about it. I just think everybody has to recalibrate their thinking on this, and there's no question that starts with your head coach.
Yeah, I'd add that you're right. Like, the responsibility of a head coach in college football has grown exponentially over the past 5 years, and it's untenable for a single person to do it. That's why college football teams are starting to resemble pro teams in terms of structure, and a GM or a team president or a scouting department, you know, a recruiting department, you know, just wraparound services, whatever you have. So,
do you see the analytics that have been applied to players in response to the salaries going crazy in pro sports? Like, this whole analytics movement is a byproduct of the decisions becoming really expensive decisions. Like, it didn't matter if you got it wrong, you were paying someone $50,000 a year. But if you're gonna pay them $50 million, you better get it right. Yeah. So all of a sudden, someone who's got something give you a little bit more of an edge in that decision making is more value. This is now gonna happen in college sports.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna be moneyballing 15-year-olds?
Absolutely. Look, we just built a brand new data science building on Stanford. It's big and it's bright, and it's got the brightest data science kids in the world. They're come to me.
It's but it's real. Evaluating a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid it's different, you know, than evaluating someone who's developed. And I mean, you're going to have it's going to present its own challenges. There's going to be real financial incentive, greater financial incentive to getting this thing right and not getting it wrong. We have 2 minutes. So the question that got me interested in the Oakland A's in the first place it was free agency, salaries were going crazy, and I noticed that like this isn't exactly right, but it was like the left fielder was getting paid like $6 million all of a sudden, and the right fielder was getting paid like $100 grand. And the first question I had was, how pissed off is the right fielder when like the left fielder drops a fly ball? Is there class resentment because these salaries are gotten so different from each other? And does it affect the way the team operates? And this is what someone has just asked. They said, let me pull it up. How do you deal with players' relationships when one gets paid significantly more than the others? This is going to be a new thing in college sports. Do you think it's a problem, or we're just going to get used to it?
I think coaches really were worried about that. And I really believe that I see these guys are smarter, just like in a pro locker room. They know who the best players are. They know. The players know. They might be a little in personal denial, but deep down they know. They all know who the best player is. And it gets back to having a group that fit your place, that fit, having team first guys. Again, if it's just about guys who want to out-earn everybody else, that's not going to be a fit for us. Now, at a high major, they might be able to make that work. But I would say those guys figured it out just like a pro locker room figures that out, right?
I would agree completely. And I do think it goes back to a program knowing who you are, what you're about. Locker rooms are very sharp. They're smart, and I think a GM, if you're allocating capital in a way that respects enough the talent and the quality of teammate, in the locker room, your locker room's fine. It's
right.
The best players get paid more. Like, if you don't get too sideways from that, it works. It'll work itself out all right.
Do you both have a sense that you're in jobs that may be so different 5 years from now from the job you took that you don't even know what it is exactly?
I still don't know what my job is every day right now, I'll be honest. People keep telling me, you're like classic startup, Silicon Valley. You're asking questions and trying to answer them and fundraising and, just defining something a little more every day. And I do think that, that fits the sort of Stanford Silicon Valley ethos, which is part of what's exciting.
I'm so relieved to hear Andrew Luck say, I have no idea what this job is. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one.
I do know what we have to do. And that is simple. We got to win football games. Like that part's
and
simple.
When you say 5 years from now, the one thing I know is we're going to need more money, and we're going to need more money. I know that won't change. Whatever the rules are, we've got to figure out a way to financially exist I know that baseline's not going to change for any of us.
All right, so I haven't figured out what the book is, but thank you so much. It's been great having you guys. Thanks so much.